Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I am super excited. So today I have Samantha Wolfe, who I actually invited to be here because I am fascinated with her topic. So Samantha is, among many other things, the author of a new book called Metaversed that we'll talk about today. But she's also the founder of a company called, I'm going to call it PitchFWD. It's PitchFWD, which is a strategic consultancy focused on accelerating the adoption of emerging technologies. Many, of course, we've talked about on this show. She's an author, a judge, a presenter, certainly a subject matter expert, but very enthusiastic on panels that I've heard her speak at, and just an all-around good human being. She's also an adjunct professor at NYU's Steinhardt School, teaching a class called, actually she created and is teaching, a class called The Business of Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality, the Marketing of Innovation and Avatars and Virtual Humans. She also got her MBA from the Stern School at NYU and her BA from Yale. Welcome, Samantha. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Karen.
Great. So congratulations again. So this book, it's the shelves or your favorite digital store on February the 7th. And I was fortunate to get an advance copy. Thank you so much, because I really wanted to be able to read it before we spoke. So it's a book, and so I don't want you to try to make it into an article, but can you just give us an overview of the book? What were you trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I work with and I sort of operate in emerging technologies, and I like to help people to understand what they are and how it's going to be of value to them. And so this was an attempt of, just covering the entire metaverse and explaining it with really the focus of what does it mean for like businesses, for executives, and not just looking at it from, what is all the, it says see beyond the hype. It's not just what is all the things that the tech executives will say, like this is going to change everything, but also have people get ready for sort of some of the issues that are probably going to arise, like they did with the internet and social media, so that you can, have a sort of balanced perspective on what's possible.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, I'd say you achieved your goals here. And for those of you who don't have the book yet, it is both well written, so it is accessible, but also extremely well footnoted. So I would imagine anyone who's academically inclined would find it useful in that sense as well. So I acknowledge this is a little bit like asking you to define the internet in the 1990s. Let's define the metaverse for people. It is not a company called Meta. How would you define the metaverse?
Well, I tend to think of it as, what the World Economic Forum said, we're, going to have the fourth industrial revolution, right? It's coming out. So we have like massive amounts of emerging technologies that are maturing simultaneously. And I've made sort of a bad joke of like, if you got all those technologies in a room and said, what could we all do together? If each one was a byte, and then they'd go metaverse, like that would, they'd be like, that's what would happen if we put all the emerging technologies together. I tend to come at it from the perspective of, the lens in which we'll see it. So from an augmented reality perspective and a virtual reality perspective. So virtual reality being the headsets that you wear and you're in a virtual world, augmented reality being like the overlay on top of basically everything. You say, how does that then change the way that you interact? And it becomes sort of a new dimension beyond the sort of 2D of a computer or a mobile phone, that you can start, pulling more information that's contextual and relevant all at the same time. And there are going to be more issues than not. It's not going to be perfect, but it is that sort of, it's going to change everything slowly, but eventually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I kind of want to pull 6 different threads here all at once, particularly since this is a book about everything. So I'll just pick one. So there are challenges to adopting the metaverse, and you talk about many of those in your book. One of my favorites is In fact, I saw you give a talk where you were sort of looking at a chart of major reasons people were not exploring the metaverse. And the top current barrier to adoption was it messes up my hair. And so, right, that is the reference to the giant goggles. And I think it does many things beyond messing up hair, but it's still important for people, right? The metaverse is not easy to access. And of course, goggles are only one way to do that today. But, I've been an early adopter of tech most of my life. I'm still not sure what the metaverse currently offers. I haven't purchased a headset because I don't need another leisure activity, which is sort of the category I put that into. But I can see that in my work with remote first leadership teams, it would be a wonderful thing to have more of a sense of social presence, which I think is part of what I may get from the metaverse, hopefully in the not too distant future. Just the ability to be with people in a way that is an improvement over this, although I'm grateful that we have developed Zoom and Google Meet and Teams and all those things to allow us to do this. But there's a next step that's somewhere between this and in flying all over the world to meet a person, which we still need to do. But sort of currently, how do people access or make best use of the offerings in the metaverse?
Well, there is what you're talking about, the sort of virtual reality, which is much more of a sort of consumer experience, although there are definitely enterprise applications. I would say augmented reality is more on the business side. So if you're going to do design, like let's say you're going to design a car and you have multiple people that are going to be a part of designing a car, they don't have to do it all in the same exact place. They can do it remotely and get a sense as to what in a three-dimensional space, what that car may look like without actually having to do the physical prototype. And so augmented reality glasses aren't really sort of at a consumer level now. There was attempts with Magic Leap to make that happen, and Apple just sort of was like, this isn't going to happen right yet. I think that augmented reality, usually if you're sort of consumer level or augmented reality, it might be like through your phone as opposed to wearing glasses. And so after a little while, holding that phone for a while, just is exhausting. So that's why people are like, let's put it in glasses. Let's see if we can do it and how it can be sort of applied. What's interesting is usually in the press, they'll define the metaverse as either like a gaming world, like a 2D gaming world, or virtual reality, and tend to immediately go, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Whereas there's so many amazing applications for augmented reality headsets and virtual reality headsets in different industries. And I have that in chapter 8 in the book. I sort of tried to go through as many industries as possible with the idea that sometimes you can actually learn from other industries and learn from the applications of other industries and say, well, if we apply it from this, if we take aerospace and apply it to architecture or the reverse, that sometimes innovation can just come from that. So even though it's a long chapter, it's 45 pages, but I just thought it was really important.
There's a lot in there. What are some of the changes that industries can expect to see?
I think that because I did this in my business of AR and VR class, and now I'm actually teaching a business of the metaverse class, and I sort of go through all of the industries, and it's what's sort of fun and amazing about it is that it is from literally the beginning, the design phases of certain companies. So again, it's like the automotive, aerospace, architecture, for instance, or art, and then you can do it from the beginning of like what are we designing all the way through the manufacturing, sort of like on the manufacturing floor, to the teaching and training, to sales and sort of what is this going to look like if somebody wants to buy a particular car, all the way to if I'm just using automotive, but if somebody needs to fix it, and they can put on their augmented reality glasses and look at the engine and figure out what's missing. I think that it's once you sort of get it, once you start going like, oh, okay, now I understand it, then it starts sort of it's that process of trying to get it and understand it that makes, you know, sort of makes a difference of like your ideas start coming really, really quickly of if we can do this, if we can have everybody understand throughout the entire process, like what a car looks like and not have it be individual, you know, individual departments within a, you know, Chrysler or whatever it is, that use it across the entire way.
Yeah. So just to drill down another level for my understanding. So I have a car that needs repair. I put on my AR device, whatever that is, and maybe I can see how it's supposed to be working. And what will pop out is the thing that is out of alignment with the way it's supposed to be, right?
Yes, right. And so that it could be that you could do it. I mean, this doesn't exist now, but maybe in the future that, you know, the equivalent of, oh, you need to change a tire or change something in your, you know, if you're by yourself and AAA hasn't gotten there and like you put on your glasses and you go, oh, okay, if I just do this one thing, it will happen. But I mean, that's all the promises of digital twins to be able to do.
So talk about digital twins. Yeah. And of course, yes, I can see that, right? So you're just cutting out the step here between I'm looking at how to do it on a screen and then I'm translating that into the changing of the tire, right? I would just be immersed in doing it. So, but talk about digital twins. I thought this was a really interesting concept.
Well, I mean, digital twins are effectively, you know, 3D models that match what is a, you know, a physical, like an engine or a building, or it is trying to replicate what happens in the real world. And so it can be as small as, you know, a small digital twin of an engine to literally as big as building, which then allows everybody to have access and sort of stress test things.
Yeah. I mean, you think about earthquake for buildings, you think about earthquake stress testing or wind stress testing, kinds of things. Yeah.
So then if like, let's say it's the earthquake. So let's say there's a digital twin of a building and an earthquake happens that in theory you put on your augmented reality glasses and you'll be like, wait a second, that beam is off, you know, and it would recognize the fact that the beam is off or recognize that the fact that a particular pipe isn't sort of where it's supposed to go. And that just, you know, that just sort of helps for safety for everybody involved. And the thing is about augmented reality, and somebody was asking, I was on a meetup last night and they were like, when is augmented reality glasses? When are they going to come? And everybody who was talking was like, it's going to be some years, because if you think of we're going to have to map the entire world and all things like, and facial recognition of everybody. And so there's just going to be steps along the way, smaller steps along the way. And I think that that's going to be like computers. When we had computers come into, you know, you'd have it in schools or you'd have it at certain places at work. And then eventually you have your own.
Yeah.
But that's where everybody's like, I'm not gonna spend $3,000 on a headset. It was like, well, you won't. Like, eventually you might spend $300 on a headset, but that, you know, AR headset, but that will probably be in about 5 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting horizon in terms of timeline. So you think within 5 years ish, these prices will be more consumer friendly anyway?
Well, I mean, it's always hard to predict the future, but it's one of those kinds of things where you go, in a year, no, probably not in a year. In 2 years, probably not. And then everybody starts jumping to 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And
but maybe not as long as 20 years.
Yeah, there are, you know, a significant number of augmented reality headsets that are already available on the enterprise state. It's just which ones are going to be, you know, sort of which one's going to win or which ones are going to win in terms of getting the size down and the cost down and have it not get too hot and all of those kind of things. So that it becomes, you know, something that you just the equivalent of what they used to say plug and play, but it's just that you put them on and it's all intuitive. And that doesn't happen right away, like with any technology.
Yes, we need training often. So if we think about business leaders reading this book, because my audience is primarily around leadership and leadership strategy, what can leaders learn and apply from this book in their companies or the way that they lead?
Well, that was really the focus of when we were writing the book. It was just like the business executive, business leaders. And although I don't think you can exactly do it, but we thought if they picked it up and were flying from like New York to San Francisco to meet with a tech company, like what would they need to know? That was sort of, you know, when you go, who is your persona of your audience? And that is, we get very loud noises in our town, but but that was sort of, how can you understand what the technology is, understand what the opportunities are, understand what some of the, you know, like you have in your logo that it looks like a sort of SWOT analysis and going to the upper right.
Up to the right. Yeah.
That it's like, what are the opportunities? What are the threats? What are the, you know, what are the things that you have to worry about? Like data capture, you know, we came all down to data, and like that business executives need to think about what if you're going to have these AR or VR glasses and experience the metaverse, you know, you're going to have to figure out what to do with all the data from all your customers. And might not have thought, you might have sort of say, oh, it's not that big a deal, let's just capture everything. And we go into why that's not necessarily the best choice. So there's the goal of the book is to just actually have, you know, sort of empower them to be able to make those decisions on their own, the CEOs of a company, to say like, okay, I don't want to just have somebody else tell me what this technology is. I want to figure it out for myself, because it really is like the next internet. And so you don't want to sort of be the company that didn't set up the website, that didn't like
grab
say,
your URL.
Have a mobile site too. You know, that's it's supposed to be able to educate them enough to make decisions. It's not telling them what decisions to make, but just sort of get them like sort of primed and ready.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways for me was just understanding enough broadly to have a sense of questions to ask, for example, things to look out for would be another thing, because that's always a big worry, right? Of the blind spots, and how do we make sure that we make those as small as possible. Speaking of things to look out for, what are some of the issues, the current known issues in the metaverse in terms of, you know, sort of bias or over-reliance or those kinds of things? What would you say are the main issues?
Well, I think, you know, a lot of it is sort of similar to the internet in itself. When you were saying the bias and over-reliance, I think that now it really is the like data capture and data rights are the thing that I sort of worry about or think about the most. Like even if you had a VR headset and you wear a VR headset right now, they say like a little toggle. There's a little toggle. And you're like, do you want eye tracking? Right. And for me, it seems like so easy. Yes, of course I'd want eye tracking. Why wouldn't I want eye tracking? But if you look at all the information that you're sort of giving up by doing that, it's really quite frightening. And so you're going to say yes, just in the same way with those sort of long scrolls of sign-ups to be like, are you okay to have us track all your information and own all your information? And it's right now it's just like, it's fine. But just diving into it, especially in my Avatars and Virtual Humans class, I expected it to be, you know, a really sort of fun but quirky and a little weird of a class, and instead it got very dystopic very quickly about where things are going. But you know, for me, I always want to sort of lead with the excitement this is so fun that these are going to change. It's going to change everything, but that's amazing. And the other thing that people tend to, it's interesting, the people sort of outside of the tech industry, when I'm like, we don't know everything, that it's somehow that's like a relief to them, like that the tech industry seems to say, we know everything. We're going to plan for everything. Like, don't worry, give us billions of dollars.
Trust us.
And I tend to say, no, we don't know all of this. And so if you have enough information to be able to ask the questions, to be able to say, what should we do with data capture? Do we want to grab everything? Do we not want to grab everything? That becomes a much more meaningful conversation than, do we want to get into this metaverse business or not? Like, it's like, wow, it's like the next level of conversation, next level of understanding.
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways, a simpler example even would be, it's like, do we want to be in tech or not? Everyone is in tech, right? Yeah. It's just part of how work gets done today. Actually, it's part of how life gets done today. The question is, how do you get into it? How do you plan today to be prepared for tomorrow? What do you watch for? Those kinds of things. Which brings me to another topic, which has certainly been in the headlines of the news recently, which is cryptocurrency. What role does crypto play in all of this?
Well, so it was interesting in writing the book about certain things. Like, I'm very biased in favor of AR and VR, and I get fascinated by AI, and I said the virtual humans, and then when it comes to crypto, I tend to be a bit of on the conservative side, the like money in the mattress kind of person when it comes to crypto.
Yeah,
I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not sure, and maybe that some of it is the stern, working. It's, I find it interesting to follow, because there is this sort of group of people who want sort of the decentralization of the internet, of currencies. They want it sort of, let's not allow governments or institutions to be in charge of our money, of our investments. And I don't know, maybe it's, maybe it is the NBA that I'm like, banks aren't going to let that happen. Like, I'm like, it's just not going to, like, it's great thinking, but it's just not going to happen in the long term. I mean, I think that there's such excitement around just like change and disruption that sometimes there's, you forget basic business practices. At least that's what sometimes like. Auditing.
Yeah. Auditing has a function. We never like it, but it has a function.
Connecting it to something that is a steady, connecting it to gold. It's like something's not going to change. Instead, it becomes much more of, much more about like sort of marketing and advertising than it is about sort of solid financial business practices.
Yeah. As Lisa Linares just said in our comments, crypto is inevitable, right? It's coming. I think, given that we will be interacting in a metaverse, we will want to be interacting in ways where there's an exchange of goods, and that's going to need to include crypto in some form. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is where a lot of the talk about NFTs, for me, the more and more I learn about NFTs, the more I'm like, oh, it's a contract. And then people are like, well, and like, they try to like talk in more detail about it. And ultimately I'm like, no, it's just a very advanced kind of contract, but ultimately that's what it is. And so I think that that's where, looking at emerging technologies and then connecting it back to something that already exists. And then saying, well, this is a little bit different and this is a little bit different, as opposed to saying like the NFTs have nothing to do with anything prior. Instead, you go, okay, well, they're like contracts, but how are they different? That to me ends up helping to sort of ground decisions around them. And that's, I try to do that over and over again.
Yeah, it's an excellent perspective and way to work through all this. Thank you. we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to talk just a question about you specifically, Sam, which is, it's clear that curiosity is a big part of who you are. You just light up when you talk about these new things. I hope I'm lighting up with you. But how has that helped you on your own journey, maybe your own leadership journey, given that you're a professor and author? Yeah.
Well, I took one of those personality tests once where they're like, what is the thing that drives you? And my number one was love of learning. And so I really just like learning about new things that are happening. And I love meeting the people in the space and helping them to sort of translate the value of what they're doing so that more people can get excited. I mean, that's what I do with my students, and that's what I do with clients that I work with. It's sort of going back to the basics of marketing and branding and business strategies, but it's ultimately like, okay, this is such a cool thing that you have. Let's talk through, who's the target audience for this, and what's going to change their, what's so amazing about your technology that's going to change their business, so that we can make sure that, your customers don't have to work too hard to figure out the value. I like working hard. I like figuring it out and then explaining it, understanding it and explaining it. I think that, that's sort of the benefit of emerging tech, is it is always changing. There is always something new. And I've said, you just have to ride the wave. You just have to go, okay, today we're talking about ChatGPT. Okay, and OpenAI. Okay. That's what everybody's talking about now. So I have to go and figure out, more about that. But it's all, to me, it's all under the guise of, the metaverse, or whatever we're going to call it. It could change, right? You have World Wide Web, internet, whatever, that it is that sort of, it is taking all of these new technologies and interweaving them. And so the more you can learn about the individual ones, and then the more that you can start sort of brainstorming about what is possible and what is possible. And that's really what I like to do. And then I like to get other people excited about it too, because it's really fun. It's a really, so it's a really fun thing to see the changes and the shifts within emerging tech, and then also see them how they apply and change, sort of the greater business environment beyond.
Yeah. Well, what a service to take that curiosity, to use it to learn something valuable, and then to translate it for people who aren't willing to go through quite all the friction that you are to learn it at this point. So great service. So just to end, we've talked today with Samantha G. Wolfe, known as Sam. She has a fabulous new book called The Metaversed, which is See Beyond the Hype, which I certainly think you have. It hits the shelves and stores on February 7th, and well worth the time. I learned a lot, Sam. Thank you so much. So people will want to know more. So beyond the book, and there's your website, which is the gwolfe.com. How else can people find out information about you and your topics?
Sure. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn a lot and been posting more and more there, and so that's that's probably the best way. And I did purposefully, this is the old brand manager and me, put the G in the middle, and if you just even sort of Google, and you'll find me somewhere. For sure.
All right, great. All right, Sam, well, thank you so much, and thanks again for sharing your book with us, and take good care.
Thank you.